Welcome back to biology. So we've been talking about how evolution impacts individual species. Today we're going to start looking more about big picture. How has it impacted the history of our planet? What are some of the large-scale patterns in evolution that we see rising up in different species over and over and over again throughout the entire course of Earth's history? I know we haven't done a lot of Earth's history type stuff, but you guys are all familiar, at least with dinosaurs, and the idea that there's been a wildly different ecosystem at one point compared to what we have now. And so that's sort of what we're talking about is, why were there dinosaurs then and why aren't there dinosaurs now and what sort of things are happening. So this is 6.6, Patterns in Evolution. First of all, this type of study, looking at evolution over these very long timescales, is called macroevolution. The Earth is extremely old. Life began 3.8 billion years ago, which is 3,800 million. Most of that life, for the vast majority of that time, it was mostly single-celled life, lots of bacteria, and then eukaryotes, and the first algae and stuff like that. What we consider complex life has really only been the last 650 million years, which is called the Cambrian Eon, and that's what this diagram is showing. First life in the oceans, first fish, life on land, reptiles, dinosaurs, all of this falls in the last 650 million years, which is really only about 12% of the total history of the Earth. And so what we consider most of the interesting part of it is actually just the very, very recent part of it. But anyway, and this is basically a requirement for our theory of evolution. Evolution is slow. It's random. It doesn't have a target or a goal in mind. It has to rely on helpful mutations. I already talked about how rare helpful mutations can be. And so we have to have a large time frame for evolution to work. We have to have that ancient Earth. But fortunately, like all of our geology studies and astronomy and all that sort of stuff like that, all leads to the same place, that the Earth is very, very old. And so is our solar system, and so is the universe. And so that's giving us the time that we need. Okay, we call this way of measuring time by looking at the different organisms that lived the geologic time scale. It helps break down Earth's history into sections based on what species are most dominant. And you've probably heard of things like, like the Jurassic and the Cretaceous. Those are different eras, periods, based on what kind of organisms were around. And sometimes it's kind of odd to think of it, like flowers are younger than dinosaurs. And grasses are younger than flowers. Like we didn't have grasslands until after the dinosaurs went extinct. So, anyway, moving on. So this is usually in comparison with microevolution. Evolution over short time frames, like the things that we see through human history, like going from wolves to all the different breeds of dogs would be microevolution, hundreds to thousands of years or less. Or antibiotic resistance, which has really only been a thing for the last 100 years because we've only had antibiotics for 100 years. But it's definitely an evolutionary trend. There's no real difference here between macroevolution and microevolution other than the time frame involved. The process is the same, the reason it works is the same. Like making dogs, this is not natural selection, it's human selection, but it still works all the same. We pick the ones that we consider the best fit, and those are the ones that have offspring, and then we control the way the dogs ended up looking. The reason there's a distinction drawn here, why there's two different terms, is because people sometimes have problems with this. A lot of people will accept microevolution. They'll agree that microevolution happened. They're not going to try and say that dogs aren't descended from wolves or that they don't believe in antibiotic resistance. But they have a problem with macroevolution for whatever reason. And so sometimes they distinguish, microevolution's okay, but macroevolution's bad, even though the only real difference is the time. I don't know. It comes down to their arguments against it and why they don't want to agree with macroevolution. But, okay, so, however, when we're looking at evolution, the patterns of evolution, what we're really trying to talk about is the speed. How rapidly is things changing? Are things changing? And there's two different theories for this. Gradualism versus punctuated equilibrium. Gradualism is exactly what it sounds like, that there's a gradual change. Evolution is slow and constant, with lots and lots of intermediate steps between the extinct species and the modern species. That's what this butterfly here is showing, for example. It's splitting into two different color morphs, but it has the in-between steps all present, from the yellow to the white or yellow to red. You can see the way that the colors shift very gradually. This would be slow, millions of years. And this is basically what Darwin originally thought happened, that there was slow, constant change in our species. And so if we were graphing it on a line, it would be a nice straight line. Punctuated equilibrium, on the other hand, has rapid periods of change, and so it looks more like this stair-step pattern. With punctuated equilibrium, there's long periods of time without change, and then short periods of time with rapid change. And this is the result of climate changes or changes in the environment. It results in very dramatic changes in relatively short time frames, thousands of years instead of like millions of years. But there have to be pretty extreme environmental pressures in order for this to happen. It has to be life or death. You either have the right trait or you don't, and you die. Because that's what produces the fastest evolutionary change. So, for example, antibiotic resistance, which this is a new thing for bacteria, what helps them survive antibiotics. It is super important for a bacteria to be successful. In an environment that has antibiotics, it has to have antibiotic resistance, or it will die. And so that's a ton of environmental pressure, a really high selection pressure. And so the change occurred extremely rapidly. The first antibiotics were developed in 1943, and the first resistant bacteria were by 1947. And in fact, we're kind of in an arms race with bacteria. We keep having to discover new antibiotics in order to keep being able to kill bacterial infections. And of course, antibiotics don't do anything for viruses. That's why we can't really use antibiotics for, like the COVID-19. Sometimes they'll give them antibiotics to help with any bacterial infections they may have picked up along with the viral infection, but it doesn't do anything to the viral infection itself. But anyway, so very, very rapid change here because the environmental pressure was just that strong. Okay, so what we see keep happening over and over and over. There's three events that are sort of a cycle that form. And because it's a cycle, it goes around and around. It doesn't really have a starting point or a stopping point, but I just put these in sort of random order. There's a series of events that occurs, and we'll start with this one and then see how the pattern plays out from there. The first is extinction. Extinction level events happen all the time. Extinction is defined as when a species no longer exists anywhere on the planet. So the more famous extinct species include things like the dodo bird, the Tasmanian wolf, passenger pigeons used to be super common here in the United States, went extinct. The mamo bird, I haven't heard of that one before. That's kind of a shame. It's a pretty cool looking bird. Stuff like that. There's lots of species that have gone extinct. Not even just because of humans, although humans have had a huge effect on that. Even just naturally, like dinosaurs. Those went extinct and we weren't involved, but things happen. That's in contrast to extirpation. A species is lost in a specific area but might be found somewhere else. For example, mountain lions used to live in Kansas. They don't anymore. They're reported occasionally, but we don't think there's a stable population. And so they're extirpated in Kansas, but they're not extinct because there's still mountain lions elsewhere. More than 99% of all the species that have ever existed are extinct. And so if there wasn't some sort of balancing process to help create new species, which is what evolution does, we would only ever see the total species diversity, the number of different species around, would only ever go downwards. And that would result in a very unstable situation and eventually an Earth without any life on it at all. And so these two processes have to balance out, extinction and speciation. There are constant processes. They usually balance out. There might be a large-scale extinction event, but then new species develop to replace the lost ones. We call these large-scale events mass extinctions, when entire groups of species are lost at the same time. And these are usually due to environmental catastrophes of some sort, like loss of the dinosaurs. That's in this graph here. This shows overall number of species. The dinosaur death one is at the end of the Cretaceous. That's this little small downward one. It was really dramatic, but it is not even close to the worst one ever. The end of the Permian was probably the worst one. We had literally almost 80% of species in the ocean went extinct all at the same time. Most of these relate to just catastrophic events. Meteorite impacts. That was 65 million years ago. That was the one that killed the dinosaurs. We think that the Permian was a meteorite impact mixed with large volcanic eruptions and rapid climate change, stuff like that. And so, so there's been multiple extinction events, and then when they go extinct, it can lead to a new rise of new species. Like this is all age of reptiles. Reptiles were our dominant species until the mass extinction after the dinosaurs, and then all of a sudden mammals got the chance to shine. And so mass extinctions are just a thing that happens. It's have happened over and over, and then the species recovers. So after the mass extinction, adaptive radiation can occur from the survivors. A single species can result in the development of lots of new species. For example, mammals, during the dinosaur age, mammals are not young. Mammals have been around for ages. But during the dinosaur age, let me move this down a bit. There you go. The ancestral mammals were 200, 150 million years ago, but we didn't see a wide range of mammals until 65 million years ago, which, ended the dinosaurs. And so back here, they're all kind of small, rodent-y, insectivores. But, by the time we get here to modern time, they're predators, they're flying, they're aquatic, they're herbivores, they have a huge variety. There's over 5,000 species of mammals known. And of course, marsupials are closely related as well, with a little over 300 species, and the monotremes, which are just that odd little group with the platypuses and the echidnas. They lay eggs but make milk, and they're just really confused animals. But they are all based off that ancestral mammal species. And if the dinosaurs hadn't gone extinct, who knows, mammals may not have done that. Okay, then after the adaptive radiation has occurred, and we've got a whole new ecosystem, as long as conditions stay the same, there's stable conditions in the environment, a lot of species reach genetic equilibrium, and they just stay the same for long, long periods of time. Sometimes there's still rapid evolution due to localized change, but overall the groups stay more or less the same. So here's just showing what happens with snails. If you have isolated populations, like on islands, those are more likely to experience rapid evolution. Large populations with a stable environment often just achieve sort of this homeostasis where they don't change very much. Okay, that's it for the notes. Hooray! So, homework, you're going to be identifying, or looking at diagrams of adaptive radiation, I think, and seeing what you can answer from there. But don't forget to do it. Anyway, have a great day. Bye.